Let's talk about two of the most dangerous giants mentioned in the Bible. First, we have Og, the king of Bashan. Og was a powerful and feared Amorite king of Bashan, who ruled in Ashtaroth at the time of Moses. He clashed with the Israelites as they journeyed to the Promised Land. God granted the Israelites victory over the forces of King Og, allowing Moses and his people to capture Bashan, a fertile land east of the Jordan River. The victory was significant because Og was incredibly strong and the Israelites were still inexperienced in battles. Before this confrontation with Og, the Israelites had already faced another Amorite king, Sihon. Moses had asked Sihon for permission to pass through his territory, ensuring they would not take anything from the Amorites' resources. However, Sihon gathered his forces and attacked the Israelites. With God's help, Moses and the Israelites managed to defeat the Amorites and conquer their land. In the book of Numbers, chapter 21, verses 33 to 35, in the Amplified Bible, it is written, Then they turned and went up by the way to Bashan, and Og the king of Bashan came out against them, he and all his people, to battle at Edrei. But the Lord said to Moses, Do not fear him, for I have given him into your hand, and all his people and his land. You shall do to him as you did to Sihon king of the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon. So they defeated Og, his sons, and all his people, until there was no survivor left, and they took possession of all his land. We read that Og, king of Bashan, came out against them. This was another battle that Israel did not initiate, yet Israel was more than prepared for the challenge, and with the help of their God, they achieved a glorious victory. Do not fear him, for I have given him into your hand. This encouragement was necessary because Og of Bashan was known for his size and strength. Og was just another Amorite king who posed no threat to Israel, as the Lord had already given him, along with his domain, to Israel. The outcome of Og's fight was already predetermined before he even put on his armor. The battle between Og's forces and Moses is described in the book of Deuteronomy. According to the text, Og ruled over more than 60 fortified cities, all of which were conquered by the Israelites. This gave Israel more territory to occupy east of the Jordan River and showed them that they could defeat the mighty enemies they would face west of the Jordan River through the power of God. Deuteronomy 3, verses 3 to 7. The Lord our God also gave into our hands Og, the king of Bashan, and all his army. We struck him down until not a survivor was left. At that time, we took all his cities. There was not one of the 60 cities that we did not take from them, the whole region of Argob, Og's kingdom in Bashan. All these cities were fortified with high walls, gates, and bars, besides a great many unwalled towns. We completely destroyed them, as we had done with Sihon king of Heshbon, destroying every city, men, women, and children. But all the livestock and the plunder from their cities we carried off for ourselves. Like Sihon, Og led his entire army into battle against Israel. In the case of Sihon, God had already decided to deliver the king, along with his entire army and lands, to Israel. Israel destroyed the entire population and took control of all 60 cities of Og's kingdom, which had high walls, just like Sihon's cities. When God chose to deliver an enemy to his people, even fortified cities were no match for the Israelite army. In the future, when they reached Jericho, the most striking illustration of this reality would occur there. Og was also a massive man, with an iron bed measuring 9 cubits in length and 4 cubits in width, which is about 4 meters long and 1.8 meters wide. The inclusion of this detail emphasizes Og's size. A man who needed a bed of this size was likely very tall, around 3 to 3.5 meters. Israel triumphed over Sihon and Og, taking control of their vast lands on the east bank of the Jordan River after defeating them. It was evident that Og was not a weak ruler. Israel had no reason to fear the size of their opponents. All they needed to do was remember how mighty their God was. Deuteronomy 3, verse 11, in the Amplified Bible, says, For only Og king of Bashan remained of the remnant of the giants known as Rephaim. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbah of the Ammonites? It was 9 cubits in length and 4 cubits in width, using the cubit of a man's forearm to the end of his middle finger. The inclusion of this detail about OG's bed emphasizes his enormous stature. A man who required a bed of such proportions was likely between 3 to 3.5 meters tall. Nevertheless, Israel had no need to fear. The important thing was to remember the greatness of their God, who had already shown his power in the victories against Sihon and Og, thus conquering vast lands on the east bank of the Jordan River. His colossal bed became famous and undoubtedly was kept as a memento. News of the victory spread quickly, instilling fear in the hearts of the inhabitants of Canaan. Rahab, a prostitute from Jericho, believed that the Lord had power even over that heavily fortified city, as she and others had heard of the victory over Sihon and Og. Joshua 2, verse 10 in the Amplified Bible says, "For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, eastward, to Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed." Joshua 9, verses 9 to 10 in the Amplified Bible recounts, "They said to him, 'Your servants have come from a very far country because of the fame of the Lord your God. For we have heard news of him and all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, eastward, to Sihon, king of Heshbon, and to Og, king of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth.'" The fame of these victories spread rapidly, demonstrating the power of God and instilling fear among the peoples of Canaan. The story of Rahab, the prostitute from Jericho, illustrates how these news impacted the local inhabitants. She believed that the Lord had power over Jericho, a heavily fortified city, because she had heard of Israel's conquests over Sihon and Og. Moses used the victory to encourage the Israelites as he left Joshua in charge of them, about to enter Canaan, as stated in Deuteronomy 31, verse 4. Psalm 135, verses 7 to 11, says, "He causes the vapors to ascend from the ends of the earth, who makes lightnings for the rain, who brings the wind out of his treasuries, who struck the firstborn of Egypt, both of man and animal, who sent signs and wonders into the midst of you, O Egypt, upon Pharaoh and all his servants, who struck down many nations, and slew mighty kings, Sihon, king of the Amorites, Og, king of Bashan, and all the kingdoms of Canaan." Moses reminded the people of Israel of these victories to strengthen their faith and confidence in God as they prepared to conquer the Promised Land under Joshua's leadership. The conquests over Sihon and Og not only expanded Israel's territory, but also served as evidence of the divine power that accompanied them, encouraging them to face the challenges that would come in Canaan. Psalm 136, verses 18 to 20, says, "And killed famous kings. For his mercy endures forever. Sihon, king of the Amorites. For his mercy endures forever. And Og, king of Bashan. For his mercy endures forever." These verses highlight the kindness and mercy of God in helping Israel defeat these powerful kings. By recalling these victories, the Israelites were constantly reminded of the divine love and protection that endured forever. Moses used these conquests to encourage and strengthen the spirit of the people, ensuring that under Joshua's leadership, they could enter and conquer Canaan with confidence and faith in the power of God. According to Deuteronomy 3, verse 11, Og was a descendant of the Rephaim, indicating that he was a man of great stature, or a giant. Joshua 12, verse 4 in the Amplified Bible says, "And the territory of Og, king of Bashan, one of the remnant of the Rephaim, who lived in Ashtaroth and in Edrei." These verses emphasize the importance and grandeur of Og, highlighting that he was one of the last giants, known as the Rephaim. This mention not only underscores Og's strength and power, but also the magnitude of the Israelites' victory, who, with God's help, managed to defeat such a formidable adversary. The conquests over Og and the other Amorite kings served to strengthen the faith of the Israelites, constantly reminding them of God's power and mercy in their journeys and battles. Og is referred to as the last of the Rephaim in Deuteronomy 3, verse 11, and subsequently in the books of Numbers and Joshua. Rephaim is a Hebrew word for giants. The Rephaim, or Rephates, were people who lived in Canaan and other regions during the time of Moses and Joshua. The term Rephaim is descriptive, not ethnic. It means ye terrible ones. This description highlights the imposing and fearsome nature of these giants. The victory over Og, the last of the Rephaim, symbolized not only a territorial conquest, but also the overcoming of a terrifying enemy. By defeating Og and taking his lands, the Israelites not only expanded their territory, but also reaffirmed their confidence in God's protection and power, knowing that they could face any challenge with faith and determination. The Rephaim were giants accustomed to battle. When the Israelites first attempted to enter the Promised Land, spies reported that it was inhabited by giants known as Nephilim and sons of Anak. The repeated references to the Rephaim in these first 3 chapters demonstrate that Israel, by trusting in God, was more than capable of defeating this fearsome race of warriors. These accounts highlight the importance of faith and trust in God for the Israelites. Despite the challenges represented by the giants, they knew that with divine guidance, they could overcome any obstacle. Israel's history is marked by examples of victory over seemingly insurmountable odds, demonstrating God's strength and faithfulness in protecting His people. This also demonstrates that their fear of these men was unfounded, as recorded in Numbers 13, when they refused to enter the Promised Land. Their excuses proved weak in light of the victories of the next generation. Nothing is too difficult for God. Nothing is impossible for Him. Matthew 19, verse 26, says, "But Jesus looked at them and said, With man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible." This passage underscores the importance of faith and trust in God, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. Just as the Israelites learned to trust in God to defeat the giants of the Promised Land, we too can find strength and hope in God, knowing that He is able to accomplish the impossible in our lives. Number 2. Goliath. Goliath was a Philistine giant. The Philistines are the enemies of the Israelites, and they were gathered for war at that time. Not long ago, the Philistines were completely defeated, but now they are resurging. They advanced into Israelite territory and seem to have taken possession of part of it while encamping in an area controlled by Judah. 1 Samuel 17, verses 1-3, says, Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle and were assembled at Soko, which belongs to Judah, and they camped between Soko and Azekah in Ephes-dammim. This situation shows how the Philistines posed a continuous threat to the Israelites, even after previous defeats. The presence of Goliath, a formidable giant, further heightened the fear among the Israelites. However, as we will see, God had a plan to demonstrate His power and protect His people in the face of this imminent threat. Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah, forming battle lines to face the Philistines. The Philistines were positioned on one mountain, and Israel was on the opposite mountain, with the valley between them. The valley of Elah was more like a large gorge than a small valley. 1 Samuel 17, verse 4, in the Amplified Bible, says, Then a champion came out from the armies of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. To understand this in more familiar terms, let's convert this measure to feet and inches. A cubit was approximately equivalent to 18 inches, and a span added about 3 more inches. Therefore, Goliath's height would be around 9 feet 9 inches. This gives us an idea of the impressive stature of this Philistine giant. Goliath was a massive man, standing about 9 feet 9 inches tall, and if we add the length of his arms when he raised them above his head, we can imagine how imposing he must have been. But it wasn't just his size. 1 Samuel 17, verses 5-7, in the Amplified Bible, says, He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze. Armor plates overlapped, the weight of which was 5,000 shekels of bronze. This description shows us that Goliath was not only gigantic, but also well protected with bronze armor. His heavy armor and intimidating appearance certainly added to his power and presence on the battlefield. He also wore bronze leg protectors, and a bronze javelin hung between his shoulders. The shaft of his javelin was like a weaver's beam. The iron head of the spear weighed 600 shekels. And a shield-bearer walked in front of him. These additional details show how well-equipped and formidable Goliath was. His bronze armor and weapons made him an even more fearsome opponent on the battlefield. The description of Goliath's spear having a shaft as thick as a weaver's beam and an iron head so heavy illustrates his strength and skill as a warrior. The presence of a shield-bearer also underscores the importance of strategy and tactical support in his combat. He was clothed in what we would call chain mail. The Philistines prepared for battle by wearing a huge undergarment that resembled a thick fabric and was covered with overlapping bronze rings. This chain mail protected the wearer from the shoulders to the knees against the weapons used by the adversary. This description shows us the care and precaution the Philistines took to protect their warriors during battle. The chain mail was an essential piece of protective equipment, providing vital defense against enemy blows and attacks. The image of Goliath clad in this robust armor only adds to his aura of invincibility and challenge to anyone who dared to face him. This specific style and size of body armor weighed 5,000 shekels of bronze, which is equivalent to about 175 to 200 pounds in modern standards. Goliath was armed with a bronze helmet, bronze leg protectors to shield his shins, and a javelin or spear of bronze hung between his shoulders. These details highlight the grandeur and strength of Goliath as a warrior. His heavy armor, combined with his combat skills, made him a formidable figure on the battlefield. The description of his equipment also gives us an idea of the rigorous training and preparation that Philistine warriors dedicated to their art of war. These items were all made of bronze. Only the head of his spear was made of iron and weighed 600 shekels, which is equivalent to about 20 to 25 pounds. According to the report that was written, he was accompanied by a shield-bearer who walked in front of him. The Hebrew word used here refers to the largest shield used in battle, large enough to protect an adult. These additional details provide a clearer picture of Goliath's impressive equipment and weaponry. His iron spear and large shield indicate his preparedness for combat and his desire to intimidate his opponents. The presence of the shield-bearer also underscores the importance of strategy and tactical support on the battlefield. It is abundantly clear that the purpose was to protect his body from arrows shot by the enemy. So, in addition to his body armor, Goliath had this individual running in front of him, wielding a shield the size of a man for additional defense. Pause and allow your mind to imagine the impressive scene you just read. Imagine the terror you would feel if you had to face a giant of such size, who was also protected by so much armor. The description of Goliath's armor and weapons gives us an idea of how formidable he was as a warrior. His presence on the battlefield certainly instilled terror in the hearts of his opponents. The narrative invites us to reflect on the courage required to face such a monumental challenge and on the confidence in divine protection in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. Undoubtedly, the odds are against anyone foolish enough to face him in battle. Observe what this giant warrior did. 1 Samuel 17, verses 8 to 9, in the Amplified Bible, says, Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, saying to them, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not the Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul?" These challenging words from Goliath echo across the battlefield, challenging the Israelites to choose a champion to face him in single combat. His confidence and arrogance are evident as he firmly believes in his own strength and ability to defeat any opponent presented to him. The scene sets the stage for the monumental confrontation that is about to take place between Goliath, the Philistine giant, and the unlikely hero, David, one of the most dramatic and inspiring moments in biblical history. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah, named Jesse, who had 8 sons. Jesse was old in the days of Saul and advanced in years among men. His 3 oldest sons had followed Saul into battle. The names of his 3 sons who went to battle were Eliab the firstborn, and the second to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. This passage introduces us to David's family and contextualizes his origin and position among his brothers. While Jesse's 3 oldest sons were involved in the conflict with the Philistines, David was still at home, tending his father's sheep. This initial distinction between David and his older brothers sets the stage for the unique role David will play in the unfolding narrative. David was the youngest. The three oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. The Philistine, Goliath, came out morning and evening and stood for 40 days. Goliath suggested a popular strategy in ancient Near Eastern civilization, known as representative combat, or a one-on-one conflict. He would be the representative of the Philistine army, while the choice of Israel would be the representative of the Israelite army. This proposal from Goliath highlights his confidence in his own combat skills and his belief that no Israelite warrior would be able to defeat him in individual combat. The idea of representative combat also demonstrates the importance of honor and pride in the military culture of the time, where the victory of a champion could determine the outcome of the entire battle. Whoever wins, his army will be victorious, and whoever loses, his entire army will lose. For 40 days he came forward morning and evening and stood there, boasting of his size and power, challenging anyone to fight him. A young man named David was tending his father's sheep at that time, and he was doing so in the small town of Bethlehem, located in the Judean mountains. This description presents David in his everyday environment, tending to his father's sheep in Bethlehem. While Goliath challenges the armies of Israel with his intimidating presence, David is busy with his daily responsibilities as a shepherd. The irony of the situation contrasts the unlikely hero with the arrogant giant, setting the stage for the epic confrontation about to unfold. He was still far from being old enough to join the army. In fact, David probably wasn't even aware of the situation between the Israelites and the Philistines at the time. It's possible he hadn't even heard of Goliath. His only information was that his three older brothers were serving in Saul's army, so he called David to perform a task. This contextualization shows us that David was distant from military affairs and the tensions between Israel and the Philistines. His simple life as a shepherd kept him oblivious to the events unfolding on the battlefield. This innocence and lack of prior knowledge only heightened David's surprise and courage when he is confronted with Goliath's threat. 1 Samuel 17, verses 17 to 18, in the Amplified Bible, says, Then Jesse said to David his son, Take for your brothers an ephah of this roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread, and quickly carry them to the camp to your brothers. Also take these 10 cuts of cheese to the commander of their 1,000. See how your brothers are and bring back news of them. David had no intention of fighting. These words from Jesse show his concern for his sons, who were in Saul's army, and his willingness to send supplies to them. David is sent with a simple task of caring for his brothers and bringing news back home. David's lack of intention to fight at this moment highlights his innocence and his distant position from military affairs. He is unaware of the threat posed by Goliath and is merely fulfilling a task given by his father. His father had just sent him to take some refreshments to his brothers and inform them that he was worried about them. The sun rose as it did on any other morning that day for both David and Goliath. There was no warning, but in reality, Goliath's 41st morning challenge would be the last, and David's heroic life would begin. David rose early the next day and did exactly what his father advised him to do. He left his flock of sheep with another shepherd. This description shows the day beginning as usual, without any hints of the extraordinary event about to occur. David, following his father's instructions, sets out to bring supplies to his brothers on the battlefield. His peaceful life as a shepherd is about to be transformed by an event that will change the course of Israel's history. So, as he approaches the outskirts of the Israelite camp, he notices the troops preparing for battle and hears the war cry. He simply wishes to observe what is happening. So David hurried to the battle line and went in to greet his brothers, leaving the supplies in the care of the baggage keeper. Consider the circumstances. While he was there with his three brothers, David heard a loud shout coming from the other side of the valley, and then everyone in his immediate vicinity began to run backward and to crawl into their tents, and all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were very afraid. 1 Samuel 17, verse 24. This passage portrays the Israelites' reaction of terror in the face of Goliath's imposing threat. Even while in the camp, the soldier's courage dissipates when confronting the Philistine giant. David, upon arriving at the camp, witnesses this scene of panic and bewilderment, setting the stage for his eventual heroic intervention. Remember that David never witnessed or heard the challenge of this giant from Gath. He sees a giant man clad in armor, shouting threats and challenges, and cursing the God of Israel as he surveys the battlefield. Remember now, this is the 41st day that the Israelites have encountered Goliath, but this is the first time this has happened to David. This distinction highlights the novelty of the situation for David. While the Israelites have been facing Goliath for over a month, for David, this is a completely new and surprising moment. His reaction to Goliath's imminent threat will be decisive for the unfolding of the events that follow. 1 Samuel 17, verses 26 to 27, in the Amplified Bible, says, Then David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes the disgrace of his taunting from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he has taunted and defied the armies of the living God? These bold words from David demonstrate his confidence in God's protection and intervention. He questions the lack of faith and courage among the soldiers of Israel in the face of Goliath's threat, highlighting the importance of defending the honor and glory of God against the insults of the enemy. This declaration is a prelude to the heroic act of David that is about to occur. The men told him, This is what will be done for the man who kills him. Saul had devised a plan to lure the giant to his death. The problem was that he was the only man in the camp of Israel capable of fighting Goliath. He was ahead of all others, and he was the leader of the people. This passage highlights the challenging situation in which Israel finds itself, with only Saul being considered capable of facing Goliath. His towering stature and his role as leader add weight to his responsibility to protect his people and defend Israel's honor against the Philistine giant. Saul's plan to confront Goliath will be crucial to the outcome of this story. Saul devised a strategy that ideally would lure someone else into the fight. He promised the man who killed Goliath a great reward, as well as his daughter's hand in marriage and exemption from taxes on his father's house. A bride, vast wealth, and a life without taxes don't seem so terrible, right? Still, it wasn't enough to attract a volunteer. People in David's immediate vicinity informed him of the incentive strategy, which included a variety of external motivations. So, here is David, dressed in his simplest shepherd's clothes and armed with his simplest shepherd's weapons, his sling and his staff, ready to fight. Then the turning point occurs. 1 Samuel 17, verses 41 to 46, in the Amplified Bible. The Philistine came and approached David, with his shield-bearer in front of him. This passage marks the crucial moment when Goliath challenges David, and the scene is set for the decisive confrontation between the two. David, despite being devoid of armor and heavy weaponry, is determined to face the Philistine giant with his faith in God and his skill with the sling. The stage is set for one of the most memorable and inspiring episodes in biblical history. When the Philistine looked around and saw David, he ridiculed him and despised him because he was only a young man, with a reddish complexion and a handsome appearance. The Philistine said to David, Am I a dog, that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine also said to David, Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the field. Then David said to the Philistine, You come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have taunted. This day the Lord will deliver you up into my hands, and I will strike you down and remove your head from you. And I will give the dead bodies of the army of the Philistines this day to the birds of the sky and the wild animals of the earth, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. These words from David demonstrate his unwavering confidence in God and his conviction that he will intervene on behalf of Israel. He stands before the Philistine giant not with earthly weapons, but with faith and determination, trusting in God's power to grant victory. This passage is a testament to the power of faith and courage in the face of adversity. Imagine the possibilities. David stood undaunted before this immense creature. All David had was a sling and a stone against a giant wearing 200 pounds of armor. A stone flew through the air, and that was the end of it. Goliath was crushed like a bag of rocks. 1 Samuel 17, verses 47 to 51, in the Amplified Bible. And that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not save with sword or with spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will hand you over to us. When the Philistine rose up and came forward to meet David, David hurried and ran toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. These words of David affirm that victory does not depend on human weapons, but on divine intervention. He acknowledges that it is God who gives victory, not the skills or weapons of men. David faces Goliath with confidence and determination, demonstrating that true strength lies in faith and trust in God. This is a powerful lesson about the nature of true courage and confidence in times of adversity. David reached into his bag, took out a stone, and slung it. It struck the Philistine on the forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So, David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. He struck down the Philistine and killed him, but there was no sword in David's hand. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine. He grasped his sword, drew it out of its sheath, and killed him. Then he cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. After that, the Philistines didn't stick around. They hit the road when they realized their champion was dead. Afterward, David took the Philistines' head to Jerusalem. This was a pivotal moment in Israel's history, marking a turning point in the struggle against the Philistines. David's courage and skill, coupled with divine intervention, led to the defeat of the Philistine giant and Israel's victory. This victory not only strengthened Israel's position, but also inspired fear in the hearts of Israel's enemies. When it comes to Goliath's weapons, David had to use Goliath's sword to kill him. The narrator says the hero kept his weapon inside his tent. They just stayed there as trophies. This crucial conflict between giants teaches us 4 things. First, facing giants is an intimidating experience. With a perfect perspective and a safe distance of thousands of years, we can look back and see the boldness and victory of Moses and David. However, consider, even with the eyes of faith, what it would be like to be confronted by the intimidating presence of that brute. Yet David asserted that my God is greater than him. Second, you have to step into the fight. No one else can fight for you. Your OG is your OG, your giant is your giant, and your Goliath is your Goliath. Don't worry about it, someone might respond, but it's a Goliath to you. No one else, not even a counselor or a pastor, not even a father or a friend, can fight for you. Third, trusting in God provides a sense of security. Moses and the Israelites defeated Og. Their confidence in God served as a source of stability in their lives. When you spend a significant amount of time on your knees, it's amazing how stable you can become. However, if you try to defeat the giant personally, you will be unsuccessful. Fourth, acquiring victories is an experience that will stay with you. We are expected to think about the successes we have had in the past. We are expected to share our stories of lion and bear, as well as our personal victories over Goliath. Perhaps you don't know what's on the other side of the valley. Perhaps you have no idea what this giant is, but it's there, haunting you. This uncertainty alone is huge, but when compared to the Lord God, say with faith, the battle is yours, Lord. It's your fight. I trust in you. I surrender all my weapons and abilities to you, and I stand before you, trusting in you. God sees our need to trust in him, and his love is so great that he will not let us go another day without surrendering our fears, worries, and even confusions to him, so that nothing becomes more important to us than our Father. Never, ever forget, the battle belongs to the Lord.